Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we're doing something that we've been trying to do for over a year, reviewing every typo negative album with Mr. TyTilly from Heaviest of Art. He's also on Instagram, Vinyl Connoisseur. I would argue a master of knowledge when it comes to extreme music and weird shit. Say hello.
Thank you, sir. I tip my hat to you as well. Thank you.
I can tip this, I guess. I got
Yeah,
this.
there we go.
How you doing? How does it feel to finally be here again after a year and a half of trying to figure this out?
Oh, it, it feels awesome. Honestly, like it's crazy to think the last one we talked about, I think, was the At the Gates one.
Yes, and that what an interesting time capsule that episode is in retrospect, because that as we were recording the At the Gates episode, when we did that, was, ladies and gentlemen, that was for the Slaughter of the Souls 25th anniversary. As we were recording that, the results for the 2020 election were coming in, so we ended up just talking for like another hour about like the future of American politics and like just kind of being like, oh, thank God, something good happening for once, or at least something not truly evil and terrible and horrible and evil. And what a fascinating time capsule, because, a few months later, and it's like, oh, cool. So now we're just back to business. And it's
Yeah,
also worse now.
and now we're kind of like on the verge of nuclear annihilation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tremendous.
Yeah. Everyone's at war. COVID is still a thing. Midterms are coming up, and it definitely feels like nothing has changed from the previous election, which means no matter what happens, there's going to be probably a lot of blood and fire in the streets. Makes it the
Yeah,
perfect time to talk about typo negative in that regard, I suppose.
exactly. Because when
uh,
times are tough, everyone just gets a little bit too stressed, and when you're stressed,
you
you
gotta
gotta.
listen to sad, mournful, like edgy doom metal and like kind of crossover thrash, like especially on the first two, which I guess we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, definitely not music you listen to when you're like in a healthy state of mind, regardless of what you would call this.
Yes, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know the drill by now with all of these reviewing every album style videos. In case you don't allow me to explain, we're going to be talking about every single studio album from Typo Negative. We are not interested in EPs, demos, live albums, or compilations. We're also not interested in anything that was released by any side project or any solo project. We will be talking about each album in order of release, assigning each a score out of 5. And guess what? You're allowed to disagree. Just don't be an asshole about it.
Yep.
Okay? I feel it's weird that I have to say that, but some of the more recent videos are like, how dare you give this album a 3 instead of a 3.5 out of 5? And I'm like, 3 is still an okay score, man. I don't see the okay, you can get upset if that helps you, but like
Mm-hmm. Yep. And to that small subset of people that are chronically online and try to come in and say, "Oh, Peter was a neo-Nazi," it's like, okay, all you have to do is some modicum of research, and you'll see his best friend and bandmate is Jewish.
it is fair to say that Peter Steele is a questionable man, but yeah, the point being, if you're coming on here with some cancel culture nonsense, like don't even if you had some legit ground to stand on, the man's been dead for 12 years and the
Yeah,
music's already been released, so
yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. But I mean, that's how it's gonna be. Like, what was it? Sarana Trueblood, the TikTok content creator, like a couple months back, was like, I'm gonna make a video all about why we need to cancel Metallica, and like, I'm like, I can't even like take you seriously because your arguments are just nothing. Like, you're
Mm,
taking these little images and these little bits and details, like you're taking somebody else's hearsay and you're twisting that into fact. Like, one of the things they brought up was like, oh, well, Axl Rose said that somebody else said that he heard James use the N-word. And it's like, first off, Axl Rose not a trustworthy source to begin with.
yeah.
How convenient for your argument that you would leave out that he actually said really racist, homophobic shit.
Hmm.
Also, like, this is not a game of telephone. Please deliver facts.
Mhm.
Like,
And it didn't help when someone found uh, that creator's Spotify playlist, and in that playlist was a bunch of Metallica.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that video was created so that they could just create some notoriety and such. Which, hey, I feel you. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I've definitely done things because I know that they'll get views, plain and simple. The only
Hey,
reason the Pantera reunion reaction video exists is because I was like, I know people are gonna watch this. That is why I made it. End of fucking story. So I feel you, but also like you should at least attempt to present an argument.
exactly.
Anyways, moving on. We're not here to talk about Metallica or Pantera. They're lame bands. Who cares? We're talking about Typo Negative. Are you
Mhm.
ready, good sir?
Oh, absolutely, I am.
Hell yes. Starting off with Slow, Deep, and Hard, released June 11th, 1991 via Roadrunner Records. Side note, sometimes I forget like the hand that Roadrunner played in like releasing so many really interesting metal records in the 90s. Like that's it's weird to see the name Roadrunner attached to this at this point. Uh that can be another thing. The band's debut studio album, your initial thoughts right off the bat.
Well, I think a tiny modicum of historical context is interesting. That like this was technically supposed to be the third Carnivore record, and Pete had already broken Carnivore up. And again, we won't get into all the whole thing about Carnivore and everything because that's shit you can look up on Wikipedia. But um, my thoughts about Slow, Deep, and Hard is it's kind of like Prowler in the Yard. It's like the perfect album to listen to after you have been through an extremely shitty and messy breakup, because that's essentially what it is. It's a breakup album when you are kind of at that stage where you are just pissed off and you want to wreck shit. So
I feel that right off the bat. I actually did not know that this was meant to be a Carnivore record, but that actually explains a lot because this really is closer to being like a really edgy, racy, kind of politically charged punk thrash record as opposed to being like what we would now call like a goth metal or a doom metal record in the vein of what we would very soon expect from Typo Negative. I mean, some of those elements are there. You do have a lot of these synthesizers and these like, really grand, melancholic organ sections, and of course, you know, Peter's like just absurdly deep, low voice.
mhm.
But I mean, then you also have just kind of these like random little sections of like hardcore crossover fury and like these big metallic riffs that sound like they're being filtered through like a fucking like deep fryer or something like that. Like there's this weird grainy filter over everything.
Yeah.
It's I would say that it's an odd album. I definitely agree in the sense that it's a very messy breakup kind of album, but I think for me this is a little too messy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, and I'm also kind of like I'd like to know who specifically Peter broke up with because there's some interesting commentary on this record where I'm like, look, I understand Peter Steele was not a perfect human being. I'm not expecting him to be, but like you get to the second track, and again, the second track, we're only like 10 minutes into the album, really.
Hmm.
And Der Untermensch, where he talks a lot about like immigrants abusing the American welfare system. And, you know, immediately I'm kind of like, ugh, all right. Cool. This is not sure how I feel about that right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when I think about that record, that's always kind of like that's the black sheep track on that whole record. You know, it's like if that had kind of been, you know, just taken out and not even put on the record, um, then I think the record would have still been able to stand on its own and it would still be a great record. But there's just like in my overall way of I rank Typo, it would that track kind of brings it down just a little bit because it's so I mean, especially to today's ears. I mean, 31 years ago, even then that song was just, you know, as offensive as all hell. And even now you look at it and it's like, this is even more disgusting in light of a lot of socio-political things that we're going through.
Mm-hmm. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't me being like, I simply disagree with this man or whatever. Like, this is a weird thing to be talking about in a fucking like it's just weird, and I can't help but raise an eyebrow at it. And yeah, its removal would help to make this just a more cohesive album in general. But even so, like all the songs have like these different subsections, which to be fair is not abnormal for Typo Negative going forward, but like there are some drastic changes sometimes with these like little subsections. Like you'll have these really slow paced, kind of grandiose moods and vibes and guitar pieces that almost kind of sound like No More Tears Ozzy, but with like a heavier, doomy coat of paint. And then you'll get like just some like blazing, like SOD or Carnivore esque kind of like crossover thrash. I think the difference is with something like SOD, I know that SOD is just like the entire album is just like made to make fun of like far right institutions and fascist ideologies, like just sticking the middle finger at it by like deflecting the ideologies and making fun of them the whole time. So SOD has that advantage over something like this too, where it's like, I'm not sure Peter's doing that. I'm not so sure. And if he is, he's not explicitly saying so.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes the record, like if it was to be put up against a thrash record, like something by SOD or even shit from New York, like like Anthrax or whatever, like it's just very, it wouldn't stand on its own. But I think what makes it stand on its own even 30 years later is the way that it does balance everything. It's like you have those thrash and hardcore sections, you have those like sorry, like kind of weird industrial sections too. And then the doom stuff, because Peter was like, I mean, you don't really find it a whole ton in interviews, but he was unabashedly a huge fan of St. Vitus, loved that band. And he was also getting more into Swans, where it's like if you kind of know a little bit about early Swans, especially from their, like when they were doing like Filth and Cop, a song like Glass Walls of Limbo makes a lot of sense. And so like that melding of the thrash, the doom, and the industrial and no wave shit kind of just makes it a little bit more unique. But if you were to take all those constituents and kind of like do it on a blown up scale, putting it into each different genre, it just wouldn't work. It's more of the whole, like the coming together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I totally see that, like the Saint Vitus and the Swans. Now that actually does make a lot of sense. I would say at the end of the day, this album, the idea that this was supposed to be the next Carnivore record, and like he was into like Saint Vitus and Swans at that time, it does kind of feel like, all right, Carnivore's falling apart. I've already got this material. Let's do something new. How do I bring this material into this? I don't feel it fully works. Again, for me, the record is just kind of messy and weird. But like, I was interested pretty consistently throughout it. Like, I'm captivated by it. Like I was like, I'm still interested to see where it goes and what it tries to throw at me next, even if I don't agree with or enjoy everything I'm hearing, which is the sign of maybe not a great record, but at least not a terrible one. I mean, there are plenty of records that I would call good that I have no desire to return to whatsoever, like the new Lamb of God. Like I listened to it. It was fine. I'll probably never pick it up again. Like, whereas this, I'm like, all right, no, there's a little more going on. I don't love it, but if I come back to it again and again, and I try to stay open-minded, I'm sure that there's more and more I'll be able to take out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, and that's kind of where I see is like, it's kind of just showing, Peter was one of Peter's greatest strengths was his songwriting. And, this is just him getting to be like less about, like on Carnivore songs, like writing shit like Suck My Dick and stuff like that. He's writing songs that are still like blatantly in your face, but they're songs that reveal a little bit more of a human side, because the reason why I really connect with the record is because it's a record that is very personable to him. It's something that he wrote in a drunken rage in like 4 hours. And
That also explains a lot.
he wrote all those lyrics right after that. And I mean, it was after, I mean, he attempted suicide like during that time. That's why, like, when you get to songs like Gravitational Constant, it's not just some like edgy shit like him talking about like wanting to like, kill himself and like saying suicide is self-expression. It's like, it's that he felt from a very deep wellspring of desperation and angst. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. What do you think you would give this thing out of 5?
Well, and that's where, again, I would give it a little bit. This is still probably one of my favorite Typo records. I would even say probably top 3.
Oh,
which is weird. This is what's going to be weird. I do love this record. I would probably give it a 4. It would probably be a 4.5. But again, Der Untermensch is kind of like, come on, Pete.
yeah. Come on, Pete. That's my score.
Yeah. Because I think I would give it a 4 because, like, even if you took Der Untermensch out, like, that opening song, Unsuccessfully Coping with the Natural Beauty of Infidelity. I mean, if you know the song, when you get to that chorus and you're just like, singing along, I know you're fucking someone else. It's like, it's so catchy. It's
that
heavy.
actually is a pretty strong chorus. I really like that kind of like old school New York punk crossover like vibe to it,
Yeah. And and I mean, hell, who doesn't want to like, who has never fantasized about like, obviously not violently, but like getting revenge on somebody who slighted you like that?
Yeah, I feel that. Like, I feel like maybe teenage Robert might have listened to that and been like, "Yeah, fuck that bitch" or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, this record is. It's interesting that you say that this is like one of your faves because this is probably my least fave from Typo Negative, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would go 2.5 out of 5 myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a pretty well made record considering everything that went into it. I do like how it very much is a representation of who Peter Steele was at this moment in time when it was being made.
Mm-hmm.
And there is an honesty to it that I think is maybe not endearing, but interesting, as I said before. And I am consistently interested in this. Like, there are some hooks and there are some riffs, maybe not consistently throughout a single song, but throughout the album that I do enjoy. I think the best thing I could say to someone who's brand new to Typo Negative, like, try not to think too much about what's actually happening and just go into it and try to take it for what it is. It's not my favorite Typo Negative, but I can at least see why somebody would like appreciate this.
Yeah, especially because, like, according to when when the guys in Code Orange sat down with Kenny and Johnny and they unboxed the reissue of None More Negative, Kenny just had a lot to share about the time period of this record. Like, I think what he said too was most of those songs were all recorded in one take.
I believe that. I mean,
And
it just has like this really raw, intimate kind of like shut up and do your job kind of feel.
yeah, and I think that at the time too, like, and that's why I think that's why I really like it, is because when you go into Typo Negative, when most people get into Typo Negative, they immediately go to the middle period. The two pillars of their catalog: Bloody Kisses and October Rest. And then when you give them a record like Slow, Deep, and Hard, it is like, what are you doing? It's like taking somebody, excuse me, it's like taking somebody from Ghost and then giving them like,
just like throwing a bunch of like first wave black metal at them or whatever. Like, hey, if you like that imagery and that vibe,
or giving them fucking Portal or something, like going from Ghost
yeah.
to Portal. It's like, light years of difference. But
which has probably happened. There's probably some kid out there that heard like the new Ghost record and was like, they're wearing costumes and they have these like weird it's cool. Let's look for another band that does that. Oh wow, Portal.
yeah, really. And it's cool. Like that whole era of Typo Negative, I that early period where they were still really just kind of, pissed off and angry. It's one that I'll go to when I'm kind of just like, in a really shitty ass mood. And that kind of just that attitude carries over straight into the next one too.
Oh, it absolutely does. And with that in mind, that's a great transition into the origin of the feces, which I'm now remembering the original album cover literally just has an asshole. Like, whose asshole is that? Do we know?
It is Peter's.
That's Peter Steele's own asshole. Cool. Wonderful.
Kenny Hickey did confirm that in that None More Negative unboxing to the guys in Code Orange. I guess cool. He photographer $50 and he went around a corner like, look, just I guess, and Peter had a very wry sense of humor. He just said, look, if you need to plug your nose, just do it. This is what we're doing. So
good for him. I admire the yeah.
Yeah. And it's
I think I prefer this is one of those instances where I'm like, I prefer the alternate cover. Right off the bat.
Yeah, like I hope to get because the album hasn't been reissued on vinyl in over 30 years, and I would love to have it on vinyl. But in an instance like that, it's like, okay,
there's no way around it. Like you're gonna have to, like even when they've reissued, like Reek of Putrefaction and Symphonies of Sickness, they've had to do like the alternate covers, or they've had to put it in like a brown paper bag or some shit like that.
Yeah,
you'd have to do that with Origin of the Feces.
Yeah.
But anyways, the album came out May 12th, 1992 via Roadrunner again. I'm amazed that Roadrunner okayed that, but whatever. Honestly, you can probably copy and paste a lot of what I said about the previous album here, although I do think I'm getting a little bit more out of this. This album goes out of its way to create like a really weird kind of like insane live feel. It's not recorded live, but there was like some crowd cheering that was added on, and like some kind of like the witty banter you might get from a concert live. There's like a fake bomb threat on the record, which apparently is based on a real bomb threat that Typo Negative had to deal with while on the road. I don't know the full story, but yeah, it just makes for a chaotic feel on top of the like really racy, edgy kind of crossover thrash that's still being sprinkled in with the doom and the gloom. And it's kind of wild and kind of weird. What were your thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same opinion where it's like I love Slow, Deep, and Hard. Origin of the Feces kind of like I really have to be in the mood for it, and I don't return to that one very often. I think it's more of like the whack shit that happens throughout the record, like Peter, like, berating this fake crowd, I think makes it even more hysterical, just due to the fact that we've never really had any official Typo Negative live albums released. So this is like this little fake live album is like the only snippet we get to listen to and like appreciate the bullshit that they would say in a live setting.
Yeah, it's like what further sells the idea of this being a live album too is that there are some like things being repeated here across from the previous album. Like I Know You're Fucking Someone Else. There's a reprise of the song Killing You as well. So I'm like, yeah, that feels like that's very live album-ish. You know what this reminds me of on that note? And I just thought of this now. Are you familiar with Metallic KO from Iggy Pop and the Stooges?
No. Okay, yes.
So this is like, for those of you who don't know at home, this is like considered one of the most infamous live albums of all time, like horrible audio quality, Iggy Pop fighting with the audience literally the entire time, pissing on them, throwing bottles at them. The crowd is doing the same thing. there's no real music whatsoever. You'll hear a snippet of "I Want to Be Your Dog," and then it's just like static and bullshit. This reminds me a lot of that, except you can actually hear the music sometimes. That's the main that's the main thing that differentiates this from something like Metallic KO.
Yeah, and I think that the whole bomb threat thing, just like it's so funny because like they're just like right in the middle of playing their reinterpretation of Prelude to Agony, which they would later go on and just call it Pain. And like, Peter just basically saying some of the most often quoted things from Typo Negative fans just come from this record, just like saying, we paid $15, 15 American dollars to get in here, and like all that shit. And then he's like, during the bomb threat thing, he's like, so instead of standing here looking at me, why don't you turn around and walk out the door? Like everyone I know who loves Typo, if you say that to them, they're just like, that's what you're quoting.
It's like, I know that line. I recognize that.
Yep. It's like the whole Leonardo DiCaprio thing. Like, whoa.
I'm even thinking like from the Avengers when like it's just like I understood that reference, and everyone in the room is just like, yeah, that's right, old man.
Yeah, you old bastard.
I mean, it is kind of a great line though. Like I get it. I would say at the same time, as much as I like that kind of live feel, it does also make for something a little disingenuous just because it's not a live album at all. And it also just feels kind of wacky for the sake of being wacky. Like a bomb threat, like why? I understand it's rooted in something real, and I'm not even like against it because it definitely like it's jarring, which is very much the intention, but at the same time I'm like, why? Like this is odd. It kind of feels like going from slow, deep, and hard to this. The idea was, let's do what we did last time, but make it weirder and louder.
Yeah, pretty much. And because Roadrunner, the intent was for Roadrunner to have them make a live record, and they just took that advance, and they were just like, no. And they recorded it in the basement. And
no, I don't think I will.
Yeah,
they just said, fuck it. Where they spent all the money getting that picture of Peter Steele's asshole, for sure.
Yeah, and funny enough, because Peter in the very first song blurts out before they start, he says, "Who's the real asshole here?"
Yeah, well, I'd argue it's the guy who was just ranting about immigrants and made a fake bomb threat, but all right.
Yeah.
Whatever, Peter. Cool.
Yeah,
show us your asshole. I again, just like the previous album, there's a lot of like little snippets, hooks, and riffs that I like. I do appreciate how much more chaotic this is, but I really do feel about the same about this album as I did about Slow, Deep, and Hard. So for me, I can just jump right into a score. This is a 2.5 out of 5 for me again.
Yeah, I would say probably a 3. Just because like it's a weird one. One that I would be shocked to meet anyone who says like my favorite Typo Negative record is The Origin of the Feces. I genuinely sit them down and say, why? I need to
maybe
understand.
For the sake of the memes, like all those weird one-liners and the bomb threat and all that. Like, I don't know, like if you were to relaunch Typo Negative today, you could definitely do so with a meme campaign centered around everything in this album,
Oh, absolutely. I think the only reason why I don't give it like much lower is a couple of things. One, the cover of or their reinterpretation of Hey Joe, and they call it Hey Pete. I think it's a pretty solid cover, which, as we go along, we'll talk more about Typo's covers. And the way the whole album wraps up Sgt. Pepper's style with the
reprise of Killing You. Yeah.
Yeah, and how it just ends with everything kind of like climaxing, and then how Day in the Life ends on Sgt. Pepper, because Peter was a huge Beatles fan. It's just like that BAM with the piano, and it just echoes out forever.
Mm-hmm. That actually is a great touch. I do like how it ends on that note. It makes for something that's kind of climactic and jarring, much like the rest of the album, but it feels more appropriate here because we're at the end,
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's this, and it is kind of an end for this early period of typo where they've kind of gotten all of their, you know, piss and vinegar out, and it's only going to prepare them for a 2 album stretch that is just absolutely untouchable.
Speaking of another fantastic transition, you're good at this. Let's jump right. Let's jump right into Bloody Kisses. Released August 17th, 1993, Roadrunner. Once again, I just noticed with the last album, Origin of the Feces, P.T. Barnum is credited as a producer. I don't know what the fuck that's about.
Again, all the bullshit like that they would do, like a lot of weird stuff that they would do.
Irregardless, we're moving on to Bloody Kisses, and thank God. This is where the typo negative that I know and love is finally starting to rear its head. There is still there are still some weird bits and pieces here which we will address, but for the most part, a colossal improvement, I would say, over what I've heard on the previous 2 albums. I think even like the crossover influences are better integrated. The doom and the goth metal is much more prominent. You know, the production, though similar in a lot of ways, you know, those very grainy guitars. It's also a lot bolder. It's more, it feels like typo negative, not quite fully realized, but damn near close, you know? And it results in some awesome songs. Like Black Number One is really catchy with just kind of almost like kind of a boogie rock kind of vibe. Like if Danzig wanted to do 60s rock, it might have sounded like that. Christian Women, which is just a great song. It's great. Set Me on Fire, Summer Breeze, We Hate Everyone, Can't Lose You. Just a lot of really great songs back to back that are all versatile, that are all dynamic, and you know, they're melancholic, and there's less edgy, stupid, racy shit. There's some, but you know, all things considered, I don't have a ton of complaints for this thing.
Yeah, it's you know, and it's funny because as the years would go on, Peter would actually kind of say, I wish Bloody Kisses had been our debut, because, you know, with Slow, Deep, and Hard and Origin of the Feces, he was just in such a dark place, and, you know, he just wanted to like get that out of his system. And it makes sense because once you get to Bloody Kisses, everything that he was kind of building towards, just kind of like it all materialized on here. I mean, obviously, back in the day, if you were to buy this in 1993, you probably wouldn't want to be with your parents when you pop that into the CD player on the way home from Sam Goody and hear Machine Screw. They'd be like, what the fuck did I just buy you?
And then immediately after that, going into Christian Woman with like the very sensual lyrics and like the slow throbbing kind of like goth metal, heavy metal melodrama, like mom and dad looking at that kid like, you need to go to therapy. What the fuck is going on here? What the fuck is this? What happened? Who told you about this?
I mean, because like, even
we'll let you listen to hip hop, fine, but not this.
yeah. I mean, geez, I mean, if I'm being honest, when I first started dating my wife, I showed her a lot of Typo's lyrics and everything, and I told her like, this is like from the 90s and everything, and she's like, you know, I don't know how people felt back then, but even reading this stuff now gets me hot under the collar.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, he's a Peter Steele, as we discussed, is kind of a scary man, but he knows how to write, and he knows how to create a mood and an atmosphere. It helps that he is leaning full on into the doom and gloom here, and you know, not doom and gloom in the fucking fly, Jesus, not doom and gloom in the vein of something like, say, Paradise Lost or even a classic doom band, but like just, you know, trying to create like a weirdly kind of romantic atmosphere, using these really dark soundscapes and these very slow tempos, which I mean, it's kind of weird to think about that just in theory shouldn't work, but it does. It did. It continues to work for bands that heavily copy and emulate the typo negative sound and style. This record's fucking great. I mean, even that album cover right off the bat, like, if I had bought that as a kid, Like if I had brought that home, I would absolutely get a talking to from my mom about it. And then I'd show that record to my friends, and we'd all be like, "Whoa, two girls kissing? That can happen? Whoa! Oh my God!
Yeah.
Whoa!" Like it does a great job at creating a really powerful atmosphere up until Kill All the White People.
Man. And
And
you know,
my issue isn't even the song itself. I kind of like the song itself. Like it is
yeah.
this blisteringly intense, like crossover hardcore number that transitions into like this really dank, swampy kind of like Black Sabbath tune, but like if classic Black Sabbath was born in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I dig that. But like like you have the song right before it where it sounds like a woman being held captive by like jungle people. Like I'm reminded of when like I can't remember her name, but when the lead from King Kong in basically every King Kong movie gets
Mm-hmm.
kidnapped by the indigenous people and like we're gonna ooga booga, ooga booga, and she's like, "Oh, don't! I'm just a fragile white woman. Whatever shall I do?" You know, like that whole shtick. Um,
Yeah.
and then like immediately launching into kill all the white people, and not even like that they're saying kill all the white people, which I don't fucking care about. Fuck white people, we suck sometimes.
Yeah.
But also like that they're putting on like a really exaggerated kind of South African kind of accent or whatever onto it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, uh. I don't know what the intent here was, Peter, but you know, it's like a Der Untermensch situation all over again, where it's like if you were trying to like if you were trying to say something a little bit more grand than it's been lost, plain and simple, at least for me.
Yeah. Like I think from what I've interpreted with Kill All the White People is basically just him trying to like say like, look, I may say some controversial out there shit, but for the most part, I think because like what I remember reading and seeing in like interviews and people have asked him about stuff like that about uh, Kill All the White People and We Hate Everyone was basically just like, look, we really believe that no matter what you are, you know, man, woman, white, black, Latino, whatever, there are good people out there, and then there are fucking horrible people. And he said, we're just a bunch of nihilistic assholes from New York, and we just don't like people. We just don't like people at all. And, you know, people are going to
That's
throw
fair.
accusations.
That's a mood.
Yeah. And I mean, and the whole thing about Kill All the White People was just basically him saying, like, as the most sarcastic and, you know, kind of like statement about Der Untermensch when people started, you know, coming at him about that. He's like, well, okay, look, if you thought I was, you know, racist and that I don't like immigrants and everything, well, guess what? I hate white people just as equally. If I hate white people just as more, you know,
Mm-hmm.
he's
It
like,
kind It's interesting we were talking about SOD earlier because all of a sudden this actually does kind of remind me of like specifically like a song from Speak English or Die where it's kind of like, "Oh, you're racist for saying this," and then SOD was like, "You missed the point." Speak the actual title track, Speak English or Die, come to think of it.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And also like fuck the Middle East here as well. Um Okay, that actually helps put it into perspective then. I still
Mhm.
think it's weird that like they kind of put on an accent for it, but like you know, it's Peter Steele being an edgy fuck, whatever. Uh
Yeah.
I
I
guess
mean,
with
he's
that in mind,
so,
it needs to be viewed through the lens of like how I would view like some fucking like edgy, politically charged hardcore crossover, where it's like this isn't even necessarily about making a statement, it's about pissing off the people that think we're on their side.
exactly. Like, I think one of the things about typo that makes them so interesting too is it's like, yes, you can take them at face value, and that's totally fine. You can take everything they say at face value, but when you understand, like when you get a little bit into like where Peter's coming from, especially with songs like the title track "Bloody Kisses," a lot of people thought that was about because Peter would write a lot about the death of family members. A lot of people thought it was either like his girlfriend had like died of cancer or something, but it's like he's like, no, I fucking tricked all of you. This song is about my cat that died.
Is it actually?
It is. It's
I
about
didn't
a.
fucking know that. Shit,
It
that's
was a.
cool.
It was about a cat that was in his family for like up to that point 18 years, and then she died. Like that was a cat that he grew up with,
Aw.
and he wrote that song for this cat.
And
And
everyone thought,
everybody,
wow. I mean,
it
I
was a
thought that shit.
everyone thought it was a love song, and to like someone that was close to him and died, and he's like, no, it's actually about a cat. It's about my family cat.
All right. Look at me learning new things about typo negative. Shit. I mean,
Yeah,
they're not a band. I mean, I've enjoyed their stuff, especially from here on, but they're not a band where I'm like, I love them so much that I'm gonna like really get to know everything about these albums.
yeah,
So that flew over my head. That I didn't know that. That's fucking cool.
yeah. And then there's like a lot of other like weird like tidbits, like that the little interlude that connects Bloody Kisses to Frozen. 30 IF is a reference to um like if you look at the cover of Abbey Road and you see that one license plate on that Volkswagen Beetle, it says 28 IF, and that's part of the whole Paul is dead conspiracy. And like Paul would have been 28 if he had lived up
Oh
to
my
that
God.
point or whatever. And Peter had always fantasized about like dying in a motorcycle accident, and he would have been 30 if he had lived.
Huh.
And like
Well,
when
I'm
you
learning
listen
all
to that,
kinds of stuff. This is a little
yeah.
bit more of a meticulous record than I thought.
Oh yeah,
Huh.
and I mean it gets even crazier as it goes along. Like and then like the funny thing is the little chant at the end of "Can't Lose You," and they're saying, um, uh, everybody smokes pot, Monty Connor sucks cock,
Yeah, that's
and
a great line.
it's hilarious. Like all the stuff that they throw in there, it's just they're again they're a band that you can really just like listen to and just enjoy, but like for super fans like myself, when you start like digging a little bit deeper, you start seeing like, oh, this is some really funny shit that they do, especially like on Black Number One. Like
It's
there's so
cool to
many.
see that they're like keeping some of those edgier comedic bits and pieces, some of the satire, and it's a little better integrated to the point where you question if it's satire, but that also works to its benefit in that SOD kind of way.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
I'm gonna slightly retract what I said about kill all the white people then. I still think it's odd that they had to put on like an accent for it, but you know,
Mhm.
I see the intention a little bit better now.
Yeah, and then obviously you get to songs like Summer Breeze, and it's just like, how did they make that work?
Oh, it's a great fucking song.
Yeah.
Still one of their best, maybe, honestly.
Oh yeah.
I
It's I
think
mean,
the album as a whole, I'm feeling a 4 out of 5. I was feeling a 3.5 out of 5, and as we've sat here talking about it, and like, oh God, there's way more to this than I kind of really thought about. So I'm feeling a 4, maybe leaning towards a 3.5 out of 5, but a 4 nonetheless. This
yeah.
really strong record. Um, Not their best, although it's coming up soon, in my opinion, at least. But goddamn, just in general, a big improvement over the last two. It kind of fine tunes what those records did well. Bigger emphasis on the doom and gloom. Even the crossover stuff is better this time around. Yeah, it's a great record. I don't have a ton of issues with it aside from the ones that I've brought up that have now been like kind of challenged, and now I'm kind of like, oh, all right, maybe that isn't such a big deal or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. I think I'd also give it a 4. The only reason I wouldn't give it higher is the fact that they left probably one of their best songs off of it, like off the main version of it. Um, and that being Suspended in Dusk, which was part of the Digipack version when they cut.
Oh,
Mhm.
so that was like a bonus track from later on.
So it was recorded during the same sessions. Um, and so when the album released, that you can listen to now, it's all on there. That's on streaming and everything. That's the version that was originally released on vinyl, CD, yada yada yada. About a year or so later, or in 94, 95, they released a version on a digipack, and this is like kind of like typo negative lore. The digipack version gets rid of all of the interludes. It gets rid of Kill All the White People and We Hate Everyone. Rearranges the track listing, putting Black Number One as the closing track, and then inserts this 8.5 minute song called Suspended in Dusk, which when you listen to it, I shit you not, it basically is like an Evoken song without growling.
So there's a version of this album that is entirely different from this album, is what you're telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and it's
different track list, new songs, a lot of stuff removed.
mm-hmm.
Oh my fucking, what the fuck? That's,
Yeah.
I'm all right. I know I'm shit. Had I known, I might have been like, maybe we need to talk about that. I would have checked that out. Fuck.
Yeah, it's cool. Like the Digipack version. I mean, I can send you the playlist that I've made of it. So it's like when you listen to it, it's interesting. But I think like if you like listen to Bloody Kisses enough to where you're familiar with the original way it was done, with the interludes, with the faster tracks, the like it's a little bit like it's ingrained into what most people know. But like for a lot of people jumped into the band when they released the Digipack version of Bloody Kisses. And but yeah, Suspended in Dusk, if you ever get the chance to listen to it, it is a phenomenal song, and it's absolutely criminal that they left it off the original.
God damn. If it was on the original album, would you be looking at like maybe a 4.5 out of 5 or something like that?
Absolutely. Like if I were to put that somewhere in the track listing, I would put it probably right after the title track.
Okay. Cool. All right,
So
I'm checking that out for sure then. I'm gonna try and track down this apparent Digipack version, which completely rearranges how this album should be, which is kind of fascinating to me. That's fucking cool.
It's pretty cool.
All right, next up, ladies and gentlemen, we have October Rust, released August 20th, 1996, Roadrunner once again. I'm just gonna say it. This is my favorite Type O Negative record. Everything that I love about Type O Negative is on this album. Everything they've built up to is here. This completely strips the nonsense. There's still some interlude tracks, but like there's a lot less of the comedy, and we're focusing on like ballads and the really kind of like mournful doom gothic metal sound. It's lush, it's evocative, it's genuinely quite pretty and stirring and immersive, and I love it. Your immediate thoughts?
I am the same way. The longest time, Bloody Kisses was my favorite, and when I initially was getting more into Type O, I thought October Rust was just going to be Bloody Kisses Part 2, and at first I was initially a little disappointed. But then as I kept listening to it, I was like, this is probably like one of the greatest records of the 90s. Like I'd
make that argument. It's one of the best metal records, at least of the 90s.
Oh, easy. Like I was not too long ago when I was like, I finally decided to go and do like a whole Topsters chart thing. I was like thinking about, okay, what would I put in my top 5 records of all time? So I had like Icon, Paradise Lost, The Mantle, Agalloch, Transcendence of the Peripheral, Disembowelment, Bergtot, Over. I'm like, I'm missing one. And then I thought about it. I'm like, wait, October Rust. Like this, you're right. This is like the summation of pretty much everything that Gothic doom should be.
It feels like Peter Steele grew the fuck up. Like that's the best way I would put it. Like we're dropping the comedy, we're dropping the edgy politics, the weird like let's make this feel like a live album. Let's add samples here. I mean, there's some goofy stuff. Like there's a keyboard section that eerily reminds me of like the Addams Family. I'm struggling to remember what the name of the song is off the top of my head, but you know what I'm talking about because you just nodded your head. There's still Sorry, go ahead.
It's on My Girlfriend's Girlfriend.
My Girlfriend's Girlfriend. That's the one. And even that itself is like, that's kind of like a more tongue-in-cheek moment. But even, in general, Peter Steele grew the fuck up on this thing. He's writing ballads. It's some of his best lyricism on this too. Like it's that moment where I'm like, you know what? I'm a pretty straight guy, but like I can see why people would, I see it now. I didn't see it before because he's a scary looking motherfucker. I kind of see it now. He's really good at wordplay. And like those, like the lush strings and there's a lot of keyboards on this record, which I really like. It makes this just kind of feel it gives this like the melodrama of I'm weirdly reminded of Phantom of the Opera in a weird way because there's all this really dramatic keyboard stuff everywhere. Um, but like that kind of like melodrama and romantic over the top absurdity, but applied to like heavy metal from the 1990s.
Yeah, and that's what I think is so great about it is like, I mean, just from everything about it, like I think one of the biggest components of the whole album is like the title is immediately, it rolls off the tongue, and it just sets an immediate mental image, and especially if you have a physical copy of it, like the packaging just sells it. Like, I have a copy of this book called
I might actually. One moment. Go on, continue. Talk to the fine people here.
So I have a copy of the book Forest by Tim Fitzharris, and most of the booklet stuff that's in the record um, contains pictures that the band took from that and used in the packaging of the record.
So you're referring to the vinyl edition, correct?
Yep, vinyl, and I also have an original tape copy and everything. But yeah,
Fuck yeah. This is the only Typo Negative album I own, actually.
hey, in my opinion, it's the only one anyone needs to own.
Oh, absolutely. It's a quintessential record. Like, it's like, how do I get into like 90s metal or Gothic or alt or Doom from the 90s? Like, boom, that right there. It's all you need. I love you to death. I think it's just a stirring, beautiful number, hauntingly somber and mournful at times, while also being like weirdly quite romantic and intimate. Be My Druidess is a great number as well. I love Redwater Christian Morning. I love that. Finally, a Christmas song for me. Finally.
Yeah, it's a damn good song.
And even the cover of Cinnamon Girl is kind of a bop.
Oh,
This is coming from somebody. Look, my thoughts about cover songs and cover albums are well documented at this point. Don't cover something unless you're doing something different or better. This is both. This is both. Like the original Cinnamon Girl is kind of like a sweet, cute, folksy kind of like country Americana rock song. This is like a sludgy, like kind of like swampy goth metal, doom metal number with like Peter Steele's like really deep, low baritone vocals. It's a little faster pace too. Like it's got an energy to it. It's kind of great. I love it. Great song.
oh yeah, like and even I love the album version. And they did two remixes of it that are also really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were made to like they were actually made to be sent to clubs as like songs to be played at a club.
Understandable.
And you're right, it's so much freaking fun. And then even
I would dance to the original song as is. No need to send it to a club. Like
oh,
it's a great number.
oh yeah, and you know, so many of the other songs on here are just so good. Even my least favorite song on the album is, by most other bands' definition, a damn good song.
What would your least favorite one be?
Probably Die With Me.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you actually, but still a good song.
Oh, still a damn good song. But then like right after that you get Burnt Flowers Fallen and In Praise to Bacchus, or In Praise of Bacchus. It's like you go from pretty good song, but probably the weakest on the whole album, to two straight, actually three straight amazing songs.
What really blows my mind about this record is production wise, this isn't too different from anything we've heard from Typo already, but it's just so much better. Like those kind of like weird buzzing, grainy guitars, like they weirdly have a lot of body to them. The keyboards sound amazing, strings sound amazing. Peter's really starting to go into like the lower parts of his voice too, and it's really selling like these more ominous and fucked up kind of like vocal parts here and there. I mean, I love this record. I have almost no criticism with it. I would personally go 4.5 out of 5 dangerously close to 5. It's about as damn near perfect as a Typo Negative record gets, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally would give it a 5 because, like, um, for me, it just it fits the season of autumn. It is the perfect record for for this time of the year, for the time of year we're in, when the leaves are changing the color of fire. It is just it's a beautiful, beautiful record, and especially when you occasionally have every so often a full moon. It's like you cannot help but put on again the last 2 songs of this record, Wolf Moon and then Haunted. Like perfect, perfect songs for fall.
I would say this album is to fall what something like All I Want for Christmas for Is You is for like the holiday season. Like the moment the clock strikes, like the moment it's November 1st, everyone plays that fucking song. We should be doing the same thing with October Rust the moment a leaf hits the ground. The
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Yeah. And like when I did the 25th anniversary piece on this album for Heaviest of Art, I also kind of towards the end of it, I wrote that like this was basically the like the Get It On for goths. This was, this is like the album for people who are more goth and everything. This is like their Let's Get It On, their like their Barry White kind of like record. Like they're this was their
I was struggling to think what you meant by that for a second, and I'm like, oh, the song Let's Get It On.
yeah, like it's their album, like their Let's Get It On album. It's like their Barry White kind of stuff. It's like this is what you listen
Dude,
to
I
when
can picture that.
you're in the mood.
I mean, I mean, within the first few minutes of this album, you're painted a picture of like Peter Steele like sitting at like maybe like a little pool with like rose petals coming down, and like he's draped. He looked maybe looking like a vampire, but like a vampire from like the Netflix Castlevania series. You know what I mean? Just like that image is immediately implanted in my mind, the mind of a straight married man, the moment I hit play on Love You to Death.
Oh yeah, and it's crazy too because like somebody asked him in an interview, they're like, "Would you play Typo Negative or what or something when if you were to be in the mood with a woman?" He's like, "No, I don't want to listen to music while I'm with a woman. I'd rather listen to Cocteau Twins."
Damn, a man of taste. God damn.
Exactly.
It would be kind of weird to listen to yourself while that, that just seems odd.
Yeah, and it is cool because like I think what the reason why it kind of like at first October S disappointed me is because I was expecting it to be a lot heavier and a lot darker, but it's a little bit more like brighter and a little bit more atmospheric. Because at that time Peter was like fully getting more and more into like a lot of the 4AD bands like Dead Can Dance and Cocteau Twins, Lush, and you can hear that. Like there are parts, especially on Burnt Flowers Fallen, where it totally sounds like My Bloody Valentine because he loved My Bloody Valentine.
Mm-hmm.
So
I really love it for that reason. Like there's sometimes I'll listen to something like goth metal or gothic metal where I'm like, it kind of sounds like all you did was like make a really sad song and throw a bunch of guitars on it. But all right, sure. But this album more than earns that title. I'll fight anyone saying otherwise. Easy
oh,
peasy.
absolutely,
And
absolutely,
irregardless of what you want to call it, it's still just a fucking great record. Like it's fucking incredible.
it is. It really is. Just amazing record, beginning to end.
As tempting as it is to talk about October Rust forever, because it is a great record, there are 3 other albums to get to. The next
Mm-hmm.
of which is World Coming Down, released September 21st, 1999. Roadrunner again. It was the band's first album to reach the top 40 on the Billboard 200, which I'm kind of shocked by because this is a significantly more grim record in comparison to literally everything else we've heard so far. I want to get your thoughts on this one right away because I have a feeling, depending on what Typo Negative fan you're talking to, this could either be a great record or like a really bad record.
World Coming Down if all you go by is Bloody Kisses and October Rust, and then you get to, I think, so it's kind of like the opposite of Slow, Deep, and Hard. It is a slap in the face only because of how it just goes from, you go from October Rust being so beautiful to World Coming Back Down being so unbelievably dreary. Because Kenny Hickey, I think it was either Kenny or Peter, said we wanted to basically get back to writing about the 3 Ds: drugs, depression, and death. And even just looking at the cover, looking at a very ominous pre 9/11 skyline bathed in fog, from the shores of the Hudson, looking at the Brooklyn Bridge at the skyline of New York. It is a grim but a fantastic album.
It's extremely dreary, extremely depressing. This is Typo Negative going full blown doom, like in a very literal sense. I'm not even talking like, oh, like slow passages and Black Sabbath grooves and whatever. Like these, from what I understand, it was their desire to break away from the more sexually charged lyrics and themes of Bloody Kisses and October Rust. But from what I also understand, it was also Peter kind of finally coming to terms with a lot of things that had happened in his life. There were some personal losses that had happened during the development of this record that had definitely left an imprint on this. And I kind of love it for that reason. I think much like Slow, Deep, and Hard, it's a very honest record. It's a very revealing record. The difference being is that it's way more focused and chaotic, I guess, in the sense that there's a lot of chaos in it. But I mean, like, it has a plan and it follows it pretty much to a fucking T. I like the more oppressive soundscapes. I like how just kind of gloomy and like how devoid of anything good or nice it is. Like, it really sounds like Typo Negative kind of going through their doomer stage. Like, God, Earth sucks. We suck. Let's just do drugs and talk about how much we all fucking suck.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, even like what I would say is the most upbeat song, Pyretta Blaze, is like, by most other people's standards, would be the most depressing song they've ever written. But somehow,
in context of this album,
that is the most upbeat song you're gonna get.
I mean, you've got Everyone I Love Is Dead, Who Will Save the Sane, Everything Dies. Like, it's just like, it's not music you write in a great mood. Even like the Day Tripper kind of Beatles medley, even that, manages to sound just like really like horrible. Like the Beatles did too many fucking drugs and they also just learned what heavy metal is. So now this is what we end up with. Like, it's the Beatles from an alternate universe where Black Sabbath comes before the Beatles.
Yeah. And and that's, I always love like listening to that and just thinking like, it sucks because like during that time, Peter had lost his father and he heavily looked up to his dad. And you can obviously hear that when he says in Everything Dies, he says, I still dream of dad, but he died. And it's just so,
it's heart-wrenching.
It is like, and for a while, this was the only, like, last year, I lost both of my childhood pets, both of my dogs, within the span of a few months of each other. And this was my coping mechanism, as horrible as that may sound. And like, I would need to talk to a therapist.
It makes sense though, because like when you're in like a really bad state of mind, you will just kind of gravitate towards really terrible, like not terrible, like just like really depressing, sad music. Like I remember, oh God, I'm trying to remember. It might have been during like the second lockdown here in Ontario, and I had lost my job, everything going back into lockdown, not fun. And I remember like just going home and like cracking open a bottle of Jack Daniels and just listening to an absurd amount of Panopticon. Like that was how I spent Canadian Thanksgiving that year. Um,
Yeah,
and
that,
yeah, and like so I totally feel you there. And this is definitely an album where like yeah, like where Origin of the Feces and Slow Deep and Hard was written during like a very troubling period in Peter Steele's life. Now I finally relate to like what he's feeling. You know,
mhm.
like he's finally channeling that hatred and that anger and that misery into something that actually makes sense musically, into something that is cohesive and is beautiful, just in a different kind of way. I would say that this album is the yin to October Rust's yang, with that in mind.
Oh, absolutely. Because you have the image with October Rust of being in the upper part of New York during the fall. Everything's kind of going well, but then you get to World Coming Down, and it is just, mind-numbingly awful.
Mhm.
Everything terrible.
What would you give this thing out of five?
Probably give it a 4, because they did record a couple of other songs during this period that never made it to the record. There were 3 songs they did called um, 12 Black Rainbows, It's Never Enough, and I can't remember the other one, but they at least one more of those songs should have been put on the record.
I'm feeling a 4 as well. Like I really enjoyed this record. I mean, it's definitely something where I feel like I do have to be in a certain mood for this because it is just such a drearily bleak uh, a dreary and bleak record. It's interesting that so much of this like aesthetically is green, like that bright green fucking Hulk blood looking ass album cover. Because the how I would describe this record in a word is just gray, like
Yeah.
just like ugh, walking out like this. Whereas October Rust sounds like walking through a forest with a loved one, and you tumble, and then next thing you know you're doing something in the woods, and it's like it's magical and romantic and like ooh spicy and scary in a sexy kind of way. This is like walking through the woods and your girlfriend just dumped you, and it's raining and it's gray outside, and you're like ugh, that's the mood of this album.
Yeah, it very much is. It's just a very dreary, depressing album that I think you can only listen to when you're in that kind of mood.
And fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, Typo Negative don't get much more optimistic after this point.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite. As we move on to Life is Killing Me, released June 17th, 2003, once again via Road Runner Records. And wow, if you thought World Coming Down was depressing, then yikes. If you weren't convinced that Typo Negative is not in a great spot at this point, then I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, I mean, you have songs like I Don't Want to Be Me, Nettie, Life is Killing Me, uh, geez, Anesthesia. Like,
I
ugh.
feel like it's very much him trying to find a way to like cope with some of this. Like I'm reminded, like I Don't Want to Be Me, for instance, has almost like a punky horror punk kind of drive that feels like maybe the Misfits or like some Danzig or whatever.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
he's very much trying to cope with how fucking miserable he is, but like it still gets through. If anything, it shines more so, like how people use laughter to cope with like depression and loss. He's
Mhm.
using like more frequently thought of as upbeat song structures and melodies to kind of cloak that. And even then, they're still throwing in like a lot of like weird doomy sprawls and keyboards and such.
Mhm. And then it's weird because it's like the strong songs that are on this record are really strong, but then for me, there are some songs on here where I'm kind of just like I'm a little bit ambivalent towards, like, what is it? How Could She? Where he like is basically listing off all these like fictional women that like I guess he crushed on and everything. It's
Yeah,
just
that's
kind of
a another odd moment. That's a song where I'm like, uh-oh, old school typo negative coming back.
mm. And then you go from a freaking like S tier typo song with Todd's Ship Gods, and then you go into I Like Goyles, and it's just like, oh, what the hell, dude?
Yeah, that's not a strong song to be great. If I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but was that not made in response to him being in Playgirl magazine?
It was basically just him writing this response to like he basically said like, look, I don't care if you know, I don't care if you're gay. I don't care that there are gay fans of typo negative. He's like, I'm just getting tired of the gay fans of typo negative coming up and like trying to cop a feel and like, get fresh with me.
I can understand being irritated by people assaulting you and molesting you. That's not great. I'm not gonna try. That's a bad thing to do, regardless of what you're into.
But I
But
don't think
all
he went about it this way.
yeah, because it doesn't read as that when you listen to the song. It reads as him being really insecure with his sexuality and being irritated by queer people. That's
Yeah.
that's how I read it.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of people read it as well, because that's a common interpretation of that song. Like
Yeah.
it's not. I don't feel it'll be controversial for me to say that that's how people normally feel about that song after hearing it.
Yeah, and I think the one thing about that song though that does make me like howl with laughter is when he's doing like the oh, it sounds like he's like on the bathroom, like on the toilet in the bathroom, like trying to take a shit.
Yeah, which it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like, why the fuck is this here?
Yeah, yeah,
it's
and it's like
it's definitely like one of Typo's weaker songs, like for me at least.
absolutely,
Musically, it's not even as interesting. It's I don't know. It just kind of feels like something they kind of scraped together with the leftovers of some previous albums.
yeah, and then it's weird because then you have in between that you have a couple of really good songs like you have Todd's Ship Gods that's like really good. And then a few songs later, you have the title track of the whole album, which has some of like the band's nastiest grooves.
Mm-hmm. That's a great
Oh,
song as well.
oh yeah. And I mean, hell, even in the in a world that's still pretty dominated by COVID, a song about how much you hate the whole, you know, how much you hate the medical world. Pretty pretty scary.
Yeah, definitely feels like that's something that could be up for interpretation nowadays. But I can, I understand, like, obviously it's impossible to tell how people interpret anything, and I can understand him being dissatisfied with like doctors and hospitals, because he was very like dissatisfied with his own kind of health at the time, and he was still kind of dealing with the death of his parents from what I understand. So like there's a natural level of frustration that anyone would feel, and it is, I think, interesting to hear him vent that.
Yeah, it is. But I think one of the things that if I were to just go ahead and rate this thing, the thing is about this record is like there are bright spots throughout this record, but I would definitely say, in my personal opinion, it's probably the weakest album in their catalog. I'd probably give it like a 2.5 or if I'm feeling generous, maybe a 3. But some of the songs on here that are weaker, I just really am not a huge fan of.
I think I'm feeling a 3. I like I Don't Want to Be Me. I like Todd's Ship. I think it's a well produced record, and I think it's mostly pretty well written. Uh, the highs are high and the lows are very low, and I again I like Goyles. Is that's if we're talking about that song by itself, I'm like 1. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's I don't know. It just kind of feels like, damn, coming hot off the heels of like 3 really cool records. This is just, it almost feels like, I don't know. It just like the songs that you couldn't make work for previous albums you threw onto here, and then you wrote 2 or 3 actually new good songs.
yeah. It really is odd. Like it's very strange. It's just a very it's just a very unbalanced record in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I
it
don't.
just feels very
Yeah,
weird.
yeah. I like it. I'd recommend all the songs we've talked about, but like, I'm in no hurry to re-listen to it again. It's decent. It's fine. Just eh. That's the
Yeah.
vibe coming out of it.
Yeah.
I would also say at times like it's also too depressing for its own good. Like
Yeah.
more so than World Coming Down. Like I feel like World Coming Down created a great atmosphere, which kind of helped to further sell how depressing it was. Whereas this just kind of feels. I don't want to say that Peter's disingenuous because I don't think he was, but this does feel more depressing for the sake of being depressing. Like
Right.
on top of the fact that Peter was actually depressed, so there's kind of these weird little moods and like some inconsistencies in tone, I would say. But it's still decent. There's still enough jams that your typo diehard would have fun with this.
Absolutely. There are a lot of songs on here that like I will go back and revisit. Like "The Dream Is Dead" is a really good song. Which "The Dream Is Dead" was actually supposed to be the name of the album, but then they decided on "Life Is Killing Me" because they felt like "The Dream Is Dead" it was just too um
Too
in
depressing.
yeah, in a post 9/11 world it'd be a little bit too blatant.
I can kind of see that. Yeah, I guess. I don't see how Life Is Killing Me is much more better, but whatever. I also was not making music in the early 2000s, so what do I
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Then this brings us to the band's seventh and final studio album, Dead Again, released March 13th, 2007 via Steamhammer and SPV. Um, it's fine. I don't.
Oh,
It's
dang.
it's fine. I don't know. I'll just be honest right off the bat. This record doesn't really click with me. Um, I don't know. Like you get the vibe. I get the vibe again that Peter's starting to tune out a little bit. Maybe it's drugs and depression just really taking over. I get the vibe that he's kind of unfocused. The songs don't hit quite as hard. The riffs aren't as punchy. The hooks aren't as strong. The production isn't as good either. Like this is kind of a thin record in comparison to the full body, sound that I've come to expect even on drearier records like Life Is Killing Me and World Coming Down.
Mhm.
And he's not even singing as much on this thing, which kind of further tells me that he's just not really as into this material. Um, and I mean, Kenny Hickey, he's always done backing vocals and even co-lead vocals from time to time, but he sings on I like about half of this record. And there are other singers as well that I would argue pop up just as frequently as Peter does.
Mhm. This is where you and I are definitely going to differ.
That's okay. Go for it. Tell us how you feel.
I genuinely really, really like this record. Um, Not only just because, like, in the context of it being the band's swan song, um, I think there are like one or two songs on the album that I really that are okay. Like the opening title track is all right. Um, and then what is it? I think it's These Three Things kind of drags a little bit, but my goodness, like Tripping a Blind Man, um, Prophets of Doom, September Sun, Halloween in Heaven.
I do really like Halloween in Heaven. That's just like a really fun, gloomy rager.
Yeah, and then the final three songs, like Some Stupid Tomorrow, An Ode to Locksmiths, and then Hail and Farewell to Britain. Like in my opinion, Hail and Farewell to Britain, they could have not. I don't think they could have ended their career on a better song.
That I will agree with. That is a massive highlight on the record. And I also really like an Ode to Locksmiths. I think those two together, very underrated typo tracks. Like those are two tracks where I'm like, all right, Peter was clearly 110 million% into this. Like
Yeah.
we have his full attention.
Yeah. And it's very interesting because like I think at the time too, this is where Peter was getting a little bit more. I don't know. It's kind of weird because for most of Peter's growing up, he was raised Catholic, and then right around the time he was a teenager, he just stopped being religious. Um, and you can see that through most of Typo's catalog. And I think once he got to Dead again and he started to get more religious again, I think it kind of opened his eyes a little bit to like his mortality. He was starting to be a little bit more aware that like, hey, all my family members have died. I could go at any minute. And so
and it was only a couple years after this he passed too.
Yeah, and that's what makes it even more all the more haunting. And and it's kind of crappy because like when you read tripping a blind man, when you read the lyrics, it's very much this really sad song about him pretty much placing blame on his sisters for him wanting to do his like whatever he was doing, but his sisters were trying to help him, but it's just him being a stubborn narcissist. And like saying like, no, you're to blame, and it's not fair of you to judge me when you have done things in your life. It's like, well, again, it's a very personal thing for him to be writing this stuff.
It's really interesting that Peter consistently, regardless of the album, he always writes with like absurd honesty. Like the man say whatever you like about the man, but do not argue that he's hiding anything or that he's like really dishonest. He is not.
No.
Like, you can argue that the tone of an album is inconsistent or disingenuous, but the man is not.
No, absolutely not. Like he was just I think Typo Negative was just basically his way of being just very open shirted and just being like, this is who I am. This is like where I'm coming from. It was just his outlet.
Mm-hmm. It's those moments that I do appreciate, like on an Ode to Locksmiths, the Hail and Farewell to Britain, and even like Prophet of Doom, Tripping a Blind Man. That's great. Like those are the moments that I really lean to because those feel the most honest from Peter. But musically and production wise, there's little else on this record that's like grabbing my attention. I don't actively dislike it. I definitely still prefer this over Origin of the Feces and Slow, Deep, and Hard. But I also have like zero desire to revisit this, honestly, beyond the recording of this video.
Yeah. And it's cool because like, and it is interesting too to think about too, because Josh Silver produced every single record of theirs. And I think I do agree with the production. It feels a little bit more thin, but I think it was just also because Josh was kind of starting to like be fed up with music. He was done. At a certain point in time, when he was going to school to be an EMT, another guy filled in for him on tour while he was finishing EMT school. And so I think that also plays a factor into it because he was just kind of like, we're not going to, he's like, I'm more concerned and more wanting to do this EMT thing rather than continuing with Typo Negative. And, it kind of, in retrospect, it seems a little bit prophetic in a way.
Does he perform music at all anymore? Because I mean, I know I haven't heard his name in like a while.
Nope. After Peter died, and he was already doing a lot of EMT stuff. He would do a couple of shows with Typo when they would tour. But once Peter died, I mean, because he and Peter were childhood friends. They grew up in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn. That Peter dying was pretty much like the final straw. And ever since then, since roughly 2010, and even a little bit before then, but since 2010, Josh has been a full-time EMT for the city of New York.
God damn.
So it's interesting because somebody said, you could get into a car accident or whatever, and lo and behold, Typo Negative keyboard player could be pulling you out of your car with the jaws of life.
That'd be kind of wild, honestly. I'd imagine being a metalhead, you like that kind of delirium that you experience in an accident, like that shock. And it's like God, and Josh Silver shows up, and he's like, "Well, depending on your taste in music, kind of, I guess."
And he was always the most like nihilistic and sardonic of all of them, and probably just be like, Yeah, I'm just here to help you, dude. Just get in the ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
So
So I guess on top of like Peter not being fully into it and kind of going through changes, there's also Josh who's like, I got a shift in 10 minutes, so let's speed this up.
yeah, pretty much.
That
But
that explains a lot about this record as well, I gotta say.
yeah, and like in that regard, yeah. But I also there's just something about this record with it being again the band's swan song. There's just something like there's kind of this weird mystique that surrounds it that like what could have come after, but the fact that this is what they ended on, unfortunately.
From what I understand, they were working on music right before Peter passed. We'll probably never hear it if there's even anything to hear.
Yeah, I think
But
Johnny
it
I
would
think
have been
Johnny
interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think Johnny Kelly said that they had only like rehearsed some stuff and never recorded any demos or anything.
Oh, so there would literally be nothing to share.
Mm-mm.
Do you know if any of that material was repurposed for something else? Because I know Johnny Kelly's been in a couple bands here and there since Typo Negative. Like there's what is it, Pale Horse named Deaf, who do kind of have a pretty similar kind of vibe and style in some ways.
Yeah, because the funny thing is, Pale Horse Named Death is fronted by Sal Abrascato, who was the original drummer for Typo Negative, and he left to join Life of Agony.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I don't know if Johnny repurposed anything. I think that Kenny may have for some of like the early Seventh Void stuff, but like ever since he put Seventh Void to rest, now he's doing Silver Tomb. I think he's just pretty much like just coming up with his own stuff, which is cool because I've always felt Kenny has been like the most underrated member of the band. I really like that dude because his guitar tone is very unmistakable, his playing style is unmistakable, and
Mm-hmm.
his backing vocal work is just awesome.
Overall, what would you give Dead Again?
I'd probably give it a 4. Just because like again, the songs that are really good on this album are like very, very good. Uh, it's just one that I like to revisit. And it's very interesting because it's like they got through their doom and gloom phase, they got through their like romantic phase, and it just feels like this album is a perfect summation of everything. Where you have these songs that are very hard, like very carnivore esque, like on Some Stupid Tomorrow, and then you have the balancing with songs like These Three Things and She Burned Me Down, which are just like these big downtrodden doom songs.
Mm-hmm. I think I will go with a 3, leaning towards a 2.5 out of 5, but a 3 nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
There are much like Life Is Killing Me, there are some great songs, but like and those do help a lot. And I do there's stuff about this that I think is more poignant after what's happened to Typo Negative since then, like the passing of Peter Steele. But the production really holds this thing back, and just in general, the material doesn't really strike me the way that previous albums had. I would still pick this over Origin of the Feces and Slow Deep and Hard, hence why it's a bit higher. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like in a rush per se to revisit even the tracks that we've mentioned. Like I would much rather just jam October Rust or World Coming Down. Like that's an easy choice for me.
Yeah, I think yeah, and that's totally fair. Like I understand because I think the another thing that kind of factors into not a lot of people like being able to get further into this record is just because it was unavailable for the longest time. I mean, it barely made it to streaming last year, and this is a record that was released. Oh, geez, like 15 years.
Yeah, it'd be about 15 years. It finally got a vinyl reissue earlier this year, didn't it?
Yeah, and that's going to be like pre-orders have already come out and everything. Um, and Nuclear Blast handled it because the thing that was odd was this is the only record that Typo did without Roadrunner, and so it was. I think the whole reason why it took forever for people to like finally hear it was just due to the fact that it had been in licensing limbo for this long.
Yeah, unfortunately, nowadays Roadrunner does not really care. They don't like acknowledging that at one point they weren't a boring hard rock label.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It's
I
crazy.
can I can understand if you have like fucking Nickelback or whatever on your roster, then you probably don't want to promote like some really crazy avant-garde tech deaf or whatever. But like I don't know, you can at least pretend that Typo Negative still exists and all these other bands that you used to sign.
I mean, for hell's sakes. I mean, Typo
They
Negative.
they've still got Mastodon on the roster. Like I don't know, you've
Yeah,
still got some heavy stuff. Code Orange is on Roadrunner.
yeah, and it's crazy because Typo kind of put Roadrunner on the map in the '90s. Like, Bloody Kisses was the very first Roadrunner album to ever go platinum.
Oh yeah, like I mean, Obituary and Sepultura had hits, but none as big as fucking anything from fucking October Rust. It was
Mm.
World Coming Down, ironically, that put them on the
Yeah,
Billboard charts. Like
yeah,
that's fucking insane.
yeah, and you
And
know that
even this last record, Dead Again, if I'm not mistaken, was actually a pretty big commercial hit at the time.
it was.
I'm gonna look it up. I had it open a moment ago.
Yeah, because September Sun was released as an abridged single, and it actually did pretty well. It had a music video, so
Yeah, reception for Dead Again was mainly positive, resulted in the band's highest ever chart positions in the United States. It debuted at number 27 on the Billboard 200, selling 22,000 copies, selling slightly less than Life is Killing Me, which means that that did very well too.
mm-hmm.
Like 22,000 copies is pretty good for a fucking like goth metal, doom metal band to be selling in the first week of an album's release.
Yeah, it is. It's and because at that time, 2007, metalcore was in full swing. So
Oh yeah, you weren't selling records unless you were like a Warped Tour metalcore post-hardcore band.
yeah,
Unless you the only exception being if you had already been around for a while. And I'm not even talking about like Typo Negative. I'm talking like a band like Iron Maiden or Metallica, who at that
mhm.
point were starting to really become legacy bands.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
if I
it
and if I'm not mistaken, would have released material around that time too. Like Matter of Life and Death would have been just before Dead Again, and Death Magnetic would have been just after.
yep, exactly. And and that just goes to show how crazy loyal Typo Negative fans are.
Do you think if Peter Steele had not died, Typo Negative would still be here today and would still be making music of this type?
It's very hard to say. I think they probably would have made like maybe one or two more and then probably called it quits because I think they were kind of like it was kind of like a Joy Division thing where it's like if one person were to leave, then they would be done, um, or to die. Um, it would have been weird because Josh and Peter were childhood friends, and Josh was starting to become more committed to the medical world and everything. But it is very hard to say. I think Peter probably would have disbanded Typo and maybe like and because the whole even since ever since Bloody Kisses blew up, he said, this is fun. Like it's cool to make music and everything, but I'd rather work for the Parks Department again. I'd go back there in a heartbeat if I could.
Oh shit, really? I didn't. Okay, shit. Who
Yeah,
knows? Maybe he would have pulled a Josh Silver and just gone to work full time.
yeah, and I think the one thing though that does I do think about is like if he did that, would people continually like try to go and bug him at his job?
I'm willing to bet that. I'm willing to bet that would happen. I mean, you see that sometimes with like I can't remember what it was, but there was like an actor from like a sitcom. This had kind of happened like maybe 2 years ago, and someone had recorded a video of him like just working a regular day shift at like Trader Joe's or Walmart or some crap like that.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, a lot of people got a hold of it like, haha, you used to be famous and now you're a nobody. And then I remember seeing something else online where it's like, why are we giving this man shit? Like he's working a job. So what if
Yeah,
he's not famous right now? Like that doesn't mean you get to mock him and make fun of him. So yeah, it's fair to say that maybe people would have still like come up to Peter. It'd be interesting to see how he would respond to it because as we've discussed throughout this video, he doesn't really respond to people approaching him very well. Cough, cough. I like Goyles.
yeah. Although, and that's funny is like when I've seen like people talk about Typo in forums and everything, that's the craziest thing is like, yeah, he had these pretty incendiary songs at most times, but like from what everyone has said, the dude was literally a gentle giant. Like
Mm-hmm.
he, I remember reading one time that like he saw Peter on the street and he said how much he loved it. He loved Typo Negative, and Peter straight up added him to the guest list at the show, and the kid hadn't even bought tickets.
Oh shit. Okay, that's pretty
And
cool. That's really
yeah,
cool.
I mean, I think as people, we all have breaking points, and obviously Peter had many breaking points, but from what I've found, and like there's a cool little thing on the internet if you can find it. It was a piece written by Peter's cousin, um, where he didn't get to hang out with Peter all the time, but every time he did get to hang out with Peter, Peter was always just like making sure everything was cool with his family. He was a very down to earth guy with just a really like sarcastic and sometimes blatantly stupid sense of humor. Like he was always cracking dad jokes with
Yeah.
people.
He's a weird and definitely problematic guy in retrospect, but I mean, just fascinating. Like
Yeah.
even at his worst, his music is just really, really, really interesting. I
Mm-hmm.
would feel comfortable now saying that we're coming to the end of this, that Typo Negative is probably one of the most unique bands of the 1990s, like rock, metal, or otherwise. Like there's no one else that really sounds like them, no one else that really looks like them, no one else that was writing the way they wrote and was willing to go into edgier and more like provocative territory. Well, and they weren't afraid to switch it up within that territory either. I mean, we went from like really like edgy, racy crossover and hardcore and thrash to like doom metal to like goth metal to like whatever the fuck was happening like mentally on World Coming Down and Life Is Killing Me. There's a whole range of emotions and styles, and it's not always consistent and it's not always great, but it's always interesting and it's always honest.
Absolutely. Like, especially when you take it from like the goth stuff that was happening over in the UK with the Peaceville 3, it is so different. Like I tend to think of like,
I would
Gothic.
if there was like a big four of like goth metal, you could probably do the Peaceville 3 and then just Typo Negative, and that's like, there you go.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And it's interesting because like those three over there, I kind of like to think of it as like cathedral type of Gothic doom, whereas Typo Negative is like haunted house gutter Gothic doom.
Haunted house, but from a romance novel.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like a like it like to the point where like if Typo Negative, I will say this, if Typo Negative were still active when the Twilight movies were being released, I promise you a Twilight song would have been included, or a Typo Negative song. I promise you.
Oh, absolutely. Like maybe like
for better or for worse.
Yeah, like maybe like Blood and Fire or something. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So
all right, well, I think that'll do it for us here then, ladies and gentlemen. That was reviewing every Typo Negative album. It's a long video, and it was a long time in the making. So I hope you fucking enjoyed it. Any final words you want to throw in there, bud?
No, man. If y'all haven't listened to Typo in a while, go do it. It's the perfect time of year, and just keep in mind from Black Number One, every day is Halloween.
Fuck yeah! As far as I'm, this is the best time of the year. We're taking that very literally here on the Metal Meltdown. We've got like multiple Halloween parties scheduled and shit.
I'm excited to see what you guys have in store.
Oh yeah, well, we're doing the stream. We're doing the Halloween stream, which will be on the 30th because we have an actual Halloween party on the 31st over in the village, which will be wild. And yeah, there will be other Halloween-ish events happening on the channel, possibly talking about spooky records and such. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more about those things, all you got to do is press this button right here, subscribe. Magical things will happen. Tell us about your favorite Typo songs, your least favorite ones, the ones that are in the middle. Tell us how you'd rank the discography. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.